Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Planet Zoo. We are back in Arcadia for another episode as we head towards our 20th milestone episode where I'm hoping to have a tour in place of Old Town and the surrounding areas as well as our entrance. Today we're going to be developing our second train station and the two habitats either side for our striped skunk and our Galapagos giant tortoises. So without further ado, let's dive into our speed build and I'll talk a little bit more as we go through. So Old Town's station is heavily inspired by some of the stations you might find if you are playing Transport Tycoon or OpenTTD as the more modern equivalent is called. It was a game that I really loved as a child, even though I wasn't particularly good at it because it's actually a fairly complex game, but the train stations there really had that quintessential British feel, and I thought I would try and recreate that here for our second station in Old Town. And that basically involves using a lot of these new Twilight blocks with some roof pieces, cutting in, and then a larger roof piece with like a clock on the top of it so that people can see the time, and it's very much a traditional looking train station that you would expect to find in most small English towns. You can see the layout there that we've got, that's pretty basic, and then we're running these beams in and then up into the ceiling, so we've got a little bit of structure in there as well. Just having a little peek either side to make sure that my wood isn't poking out of the other side of it, and then bringing it all down and getting it all nice and leveled up. Now, I didn't do a lot of interior decoration in this train station because I didn't think it was necessary. It's very much going to be an exterior looking place. We could put some little posters and stuff in there. Now, speaking of which, I do put some posters later on the outside of the building that I think look really cool, and you will see them in the tour. Putting our clock in, and then obviously this looks a little bit bare, so we need to do a few different adjustments, and I played around with little different pillars and stuff like that. Of course, we put the eaves in just to give a little bit more of a dimension to the roof itself, and then it's just about finding what we can use. So I wanted to put in some stone supports, which we did. These are the stone supports. We put them on either side of the building and then have it running all the way around as well, so that we've got some nice structural support in there. And just making sure that everything is very well kind of duplicated on either side, so we've got that continuity and a nice little extra kind of bit of flair for our building to give it a bit more of a dimension so it doesn't look like one flat piece. Something that I always do and something that I'd recommend you do as well if you're making these builds and want just to add that little bit of detail in. Like I've always said, it's about building layers. So you have your base layer, which is these basic 4-meter structures and stuff that you wrap all the way around. And then you just add bits on, little bit by little bit. Once you get these stonework pieces put in, you would then add maybe some wood or some foliage and stuff like that, just to really give your builds that extra little bit of definition. Now, one thing I didn't do was the train entrance and exits for these stations. I've not actually put anything on those, so we may need to come back and just add a little bit of extra on there just to make sure that everything's looking really good. I then came around and decided that I was going to have to add some extra bits and pieces in here just to give it an even further bit of detailing. And of course, we brought in these European bridge support type pieces just to finish it all off and give it an extra bit of colour and a nice texture differential just to make sure that everything's standing out really nice. Now, I tried using these pillars and it just really didn't work, and it's such a shame because I really wanted it to. But what I ended up doing, that I have completely forgotten to show, but you will see later on, I used once again the same kind of gargoyle supports that we have with the new Twilight pack. And I made some brand new pillars and a little kind of overhang in that central area, like where the clock is, that had some nice windows, a bit of glass in there, and then hung some of the European flags from it so that it had a lot more detail than what we currently have. I then put some TV screens on it, and that's where our new posters are going to be. I'll talk a little bit more about the posters later on, but next step is to put some foliage, and you can see the struggle that I was having with these pillars, which is why they didn't work, and also it kind of ended up being a little bit weird in trying to kind of move them into position. So I abandoned that idea, and you will see now in the background while I'm doing this rock and foliage work what we've ended up with. Put in some more lights, some of the shields, some of the European lighting, and then hung some bunting from the archways. The archways as well I decorated really nicely using some of the twilight window beams, and they kind of cut into either side of it. You can see it's looking really nice so far. So once again, we're building up our foliage in very much the same way we do our building work. We put some trees in, and then we start adding these daffodils, dandelions, daisies, lady fern and stuff like that, just to really bulk everything out. You get a nice mix of different shades of green and different textures with the different leaves and stuff. So got nettles in there as well. And then I wanted a nice tree, but I didn't want to block off these posters that we've put in, so we just used a birch sapling. Putting in a little bit more rock work here, and I wanted this to kind of be a little bit of a theme, a little montage or scene that kind of shows off all of the animals that you're going to see in Old Town. Now obviously we don't have statuettes of all of the animals yet, and I have some reward statues that I don't think I've unlocked, probably because I don't play a lot of the challenge modes or like scenarios. But we put in some stone raccoons, and then we looked to add some extras in there as well. I was going to put the stag in, but it's so big I decided to go with reindeers instead. Even though we don't have reindeers in this area of the zoo, it's still a vaguely deer looking thing, so we added that in. And then we used some fennec foxes as well, even though we don't have fennec foxes in here. We do, however, have a Kowalski's horse, so that statue's in there and it's all looking good. But the fennec foxes, they just kind of look like normal foxes as well, so we can get away with that one too. Then it was about making sure that we have a little bit of foliage poking through the rockwork, so that doesn't all look like one flat piece and one texture and colour. And that was just about it. Pretty much finished with this. So we can move on now to our first habitat, which is going to be our striped skunk. Now, the reason I'm just quickly going through these is because we've already done a striped skunk build. Same with the Galapagos giant tortoise. Well, we haven't actually done a full build, but I did put the Galapagos giant tortoise in the habitat that was originally for the striped skunk, and it still didn't work, as I explained in my last episode. So we've ended up moving them to this area, and they're going to be on either side. So striped skunks here and the Galapagos giant tortoise in the habitat opposite. So I want to get these ones done today so that those animals can come back into the zoo and everything can be happy and hunky-dory. So I wanted to make some little custom signs here. Now, this is meant to represent text. Now, you may have seen these. A lot of other the creators in the Planet Zoo community do stuff like this as well, and I thought I would put my own artistic flair on it. So you basically have these blocks that represent lines of text, and they just go onto a board. And then I was kind of looking for something a little bit thinner, so as if these thick black wedges are some sort of highlighting text, and then we have little lines of text next to it, like these could be fun facts or something about striped skunks. That's what I was aiming for. This was too thin, so I ended up using the metal beams that I've used to decorate a lot of stuff, and that's just kind of made everything a lot easier, and I think it really stands out. It's a nice little thing. It means that I don't have to go in and do custom signage and stuff and put them onto TV screens. I mean, at some point I would love to do that, and I have actually seen on the workshop a lot of people have put a lot of effort into doing these like little fun facts and stuff for those animals, and it's really cool. I may actually just go to the workshop and use some of them instead, and then obviously I will let you know where I found them. Give some props to the creators of the stuff, because the workshop is full of amazing things, and I would totally recommend checking it out if you're a little bit short on inspiration and just want to use someone else's work in your zoos, or use that to inspire your own builds. Basically, that's what I do. If I see something on YouTube, or I've seen someone do some work or something in the workshop, and I think, oh, I could create that myself and do it in my own way, so that's what I do. And it's a really useful thing to do. I mean, there's so much inspiration in this community. It's really nice to see. And I wanted to do a little bit of a twist on the usual designs of these buildings. So I brought in some of the conservation pieces and just made some little design adjustments to the walls, which I thought looked really cool. And obviously you can see the interiors on these buildings are still vacant because I hadn't planned on actually opening them up and making them into habitats. These were all just going to be buildings, but it makes sense to have them become habitats, especially when we've got a lot of space here that we can utilize to the maximum. Given that I'm trying to bring in as many animals as I possibly can into this zoo, we want to try and cram as much as we can into it. Obviously, planning ahead, we've got the wetlands and mountain biomes that I'm going to be putting into place. These may not be the only wetlands and mountain biomes that we do, but Old Town's very much a cramped space. We've managed to cram a lot of animals in here, including the ones in the farmland area that we're hoping to finish off as well, although that won't be ready for the tour. That'll be something that we'll come back to at some point. But Old Town itself has a lot of animals crammed into it. I can't even think to do a list off the top of my head, but the wetlands and mountain biomes that we're creating are going to be a lot more open and not as cramped and enclosed as Old Town is. But I'm really looking forward to that. Anyway, back to this build. This was a lot of kind of like messing around and just making sure that we were getting all of the details in there. And I think it looks really good. It was nice to kind of open these buildings up and incorporate them a little bit more into the overall feel of Old Town, especially when we start putting in the habitat designs. Now, these Arctic shop canopies, I've always wanted to use them as like a doorway to kind of like hang over the top of one. But they have a weird angle, and I think I managed to get it right that time, so it's looking good and it's in there. We then put in a little bit of bunting. These ones, this kind of like long one with a deep curve, I can never put anything else next to it because they've got they hang so low, the other bunting sitting next to it just never looks right. But we put in some windows and stuff on this side, and obviously these buildings could do with a little bit more decoration, and that's what I'm going to be doing as kind of like a finishing touches episode, just to finish everything off. And because the detailing on these buildings isn't actually part of the habitat, I'm not doing it as part of the habitat build because it doesn't actually affect the habitat at all. But I do also need to be aware of the fact that if I put like ivy or something on these buildings, they may not be suited to the animals that I have in the habitat. So these buildings may end up with more kind of like damaged decals and stuff on there, or some windows, or we do some custom roof designs and stuff just to change it up a little bit so it doesn't look like one blank space. But that's again to come in the future. Now, the striped skunks, I really just wanted to give them a nice habitat. I mean, you can see there's going to be a lot of areas where they can have a little bit of privacy, and it'll be a really nice kind of habitat. I put in a little bit of lighting here as well, using these European fairy lights, because they look really warm when they're on and when it's nighttime. And I thought I'd decorate the entire building with them, which always looks good. I really like kind of playing around with the lighting now, so that's something that I'm going to be doing as well, off camera probably, because decorating stuff and doing a nighttime video where I'm building isn't great. Next up, we're going to be putting in the foliage in our striped skunk habitat. Now, this is where I wanted to make use of some of the burrows. So for my burrows, I don't really like having them just kind of there. They really need to be, for me anyway, part of an environment. So I really like to fill foliage in and put a load around there and then put the burrow in and try and have it as covered as possible. Now, I tried this with the badger habitat and it didn't quite work. The badgers seemed to get stuck when they came out of the burrow. And what they ended up doing was just kind of sitting in the same place, and their needs and stuff would drop and it wouldn't be great, but there was never any alerts and stuff. And it was strange because they could get in, but when they got out, they seemed to glitch and get stuck. So hopefully this doesn't happen with a striped skunk. And as you can see, bringing in my favourite again, the arrowwood bush, which always looks great in a habitat. And then mixing that up with my usual bracken and bramble bushes, and then putting in a few sunflowers and other bits and pieces as well. You could already see we put some azaleas in. We've got Dutchman's breeches in here, and I think later on we add in like a little hydrangea plant. A couple of mossy rocks in here as well, just to really flesh out this area. I think it looks really nice. It's got that really lovely overgrown feel where we've just kind of put in these things and then nature's been allowed to do its thing. And as you can see there, we're building up textures, building up green spaces and stuff, and it all looks really nice. And as they come through that train as well, they're going to be able to look into the habitat and see the skunks moving around, which I really like. I'd like to kind of bring a little bit more into that train as well, so that as people are coming around, they're able to go through habitats or see bits and pieces of a habitat, which would be really nice. Get them up nice and close to those animals as they ride around in the train. And then we came around to the front of the habitat and started putting in some foliage here. Now you can see there's a little bit of a choke point as the skunks would move around to the other side of the habitat where they get a little bit more privacy. So I kind of want to leave this area as open as I possibly can, but we still managed to squeeze in a few big trees, some more sunflowers, and then Dutchman's breeches again before filling it all in with the usual foliage that we normally use as a base. Cornflowers came in on this one, so we've got the buttercups on one side, the cornflowers in here, and I think I did put some daisies in earlier as well, but you're kind of getting a bit of a feel of how I do foliage now. Like, if you've not seen an episode yet, I really like to play around with all of the textures and different shades when I'm doing foliage, and I like to hide all of my enrichment items as much as possible. Somebody did give me a tip not too long ago that I can actually sink the spawner into the ground and it won't affect anything, so thank you for that tip. I did not realise that was a thing. Anyway, we came in with our terrain paintbrush and did a little bit of work here just to finish everything off. A couple of rock works coming in and getting some painting done as well, then some long grass on either side. Obviously we negate different pieces what we've done, but it was just about making sure that everything was right. Now over at our Galapagos giant tortoises, these guys don't have as big a necessary footprint for foliage. So what I mean by that is that absolute jargon that just came out of my mouth is the striped skunk can have up to like 100% coverage on foliage. The Galapagos giant tortoise, they can only take about 45 to 50%, which means we are a little bit hamstrung in terms of decorating the habitat. So we're going to be doing a lot more rock work in here and a lot more bulking out of the habitat with various other means and methods. So we put in a little pond here. I ended up turning this into a different kind of colour, so I wanted it to be a bit dirtier. Because it's quite a shallow pool. The Galapagos giant tortoise don't do very well with deep water. They kind of have a little bit of a paddle, but I wanted to create a natural pond in here because it fills up the space without needing to put in foliage, which then means the requirements for foliage don't increase so much, and I don't have like vast open spaces, because I don't like having a habitat like that would be this size and not being able to put a lot of foliage in. You have to be creative and find different ways to make a habitat look filled out. So that's what we did. That's why we made this little rockery with a pond, and then we put a couple of strangler roots coming through, and then once again turned our attention to scaeviola bushes this time, which I've not used in a while because the Galapagos giant tortoise have a totally different environment, biome, and temperate kind of style to all of the animals in Old Town, which means that they're a little bit of a I guess we could call them the black sheep of Old Town, because everything that they have, they don't really doesn't really suit the actual decor of Old Town, but we make it work by incorporating various other means and methods, so this still looks like a nice habitat. I'm not keen on using a palm tree in here. It's the one thing that I didn't really want to do, but we can work with it and live with that. That's absolutely not an issue at all. Coming in with our enrichment items now for a Galapagos giant tortoise, we put in an ice ball, the usual feeders and stuff. The dog ball, I don't know if they're ever going to be able to get to that, but I thought I'd leave it in there anyway. And then we just need to put some mesh in covering these windows here, because those tortoises get spooked quite easily. I remember in my previous two franchises, my previous one franchise, I just moved the habitat around a couple of times. So the Galapagos giant tortoise I had in Saltwell Safari Park would get scared all the time. The problem with that is when these guys are scared and stressed out and try to escape to somewhere private, they're very slow, so the stress levels don't go down very quickly. Anyway, I then moved them to my reptile house in Saltwell Safari Park, and they kind of improved a little bit there, but it was such a small area that I ended up not liking it. Anyway, back to this. We're doing a little bit of interior decoration here. Now, because the giant tortoises, they have a bit of luxury in that this habitat is huge for them. So they've gone from being in this tiny little cramped habitat to being in something that's akin to a mansion, I guess. So I made this just like a backstage staff area where we put in a lot of stuff that is, I guess, in storage. So lots of empty pallets and stuff. So I made a little staircase here for staff to go up, and the tortoises shouldn't actually be able to climb it. And then I wanted to create there's like a big sink and stuff. I don't know why I'm getting ahead of myself, because you're actually going to see me build it. I just wish I'd shown you the build process of the exterior of that train station a little bit more, but I forgot to hit record after getting frustrated with those pillars that I was trying to make. Anyway, forgetting that the Galapagos giant tortoise need a lot of sand and long grass, I then came around with my terrain paintbrush and finished everything off there. Next up, we're bringing in some backstage lighting here, and then we can start putting in our pallets and extra bits and pieces for storage. So this was just an easy process, the usual kind of stuff that I do when I'm making these backstage areas. Lots of junk kind of dotted around, a couple of boxes, then the tools, but I really wanted to make something that was a little bit more of a statement piece for this little backstage area, which is why I had the idea to put in a sink, which would essentially be something that the staff could use and like use it to fill up buckets and things like that. Because obviously I have those like little water tower things. They're not water towers, you know what I mean, the little water buckets. You can see it at the bottom of your screen there, and I'm going to put it in a second anyway, so you will get there. There we go, the water butt and the watering can, all of it going in. We put in a usual wheelbarrow that's kind of plopped against the wall there, and then a few other decorative items. Now, this is what I'm talking about. The East Asia water shrine is perfect for creating a sink. I put it in, it's got that lovely little stone surround. We put this wood piece all the way down. So now we have what is essentially a little sink here that the staff would use to kind of, I don't know, wash stuff or maybe even bathe the tortoises. They could bring them up here and give them a little bath. It's got enough space and it's shallow enough, and I think that's a really cool little idea actually. That's why I've done this. It's a bath for the tortoises. Do you think did I get away with that? I don't think I did. So this was basically just something that I put in initially as a decorative item, but now I feel like there's a bit more reason to it. I wanted to give it kind of like a little bit of a piping thing as well, so it was really simple. It doesn't look amazing, but I think it does the job. It gives you that little nod, which is what it's all about, because obviously we've got a plethora of decorative options and stuff here in Planet Zoo, but some of the stuff that you want to create you just don't have. So to be able to give like a little nod to it, I think is enough, and it kind of forces you to kind of use your imagination, suspend your disbelief, all of that sort of stuff. Put in a bit of like decal work and stuff, a little bit of moss in here, and then some of the cracked stonework. And I'm already going to say now, some of the exterior stuff here as well needs a little bit more work, and that's going to be done in an off-camera episode or in a finishing touches episode before I do the full tour of this old town area. Next week though, we are going to be developing our entrance, and I've got a big idea for that I'm really looking forward to getting started on. So I wanted to decorate this interior section a little bit, and I had the idea to use this trellis from the Arctic pack just to give the wall a little bit more of a decorative flair. I've become conscious that a lot of the go-to stuff here is getting very samey, so using the cracked stonework and the decal and stuff like that, and I wanted to kind of bring in something a little bit different so that we're not again creating the same patterns and stuff, which is why I went with this trellis. I think it looks really cool, and we actually incorporate it on the exterior of the building as well, and it allowed me to create a lovely little door frame here as well, again bringing up the Arctic wood pieces just to finish it all off. Now we are approaching our tour, so I am just going to be quiet now because you can probably hear in my voice I'm still a little bit ill. It's come back, if anything. I've not gotten rid of it yet, so it's quite frustrating. It's really hindering my ability to put out good stuff. But I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you drop me a like, comment on the video, whatever it is you want to do. I'm also a humble affiliate. If you do want to buy any of the Planet Zoo DLC or the game itself or any other games, I'll put my link in the description. It would be really great. It would support me as a creator. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.